Thanks everybody for joining us. We had a really big turnout RSVP for this. I'm Steel Wagstaff. I'm the Educational Client Manager here at Pressbooks. And joining me as the co-host of today's webinar is Taylor McGrath. Taylor, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
I'm Taylor. I'm the support specialist at Pressbooks, and Steel and I will be sharing today's webinar, going back and forth, showing you the new features that we've released over the last couple of months this summer.
Thanks, Taylor. Also joining us on the call, besides the many guests, is our colleague Liz Mays. Liz will be monitoring the chat, and so if you have something that you want to ask or something that comes up for you during the webinar, probably best just put it in chat, and then Liz will alert us at appropriate times when those questions have come in, and we'll try to handle them and take them there. It's been a long time since we've had our last webinar, but Taylor and I try to do these fairly regularly after we've had major releases. The focus for this webinar is mainly to kind of show off for all of you that are network managers on our EDU hosted plans what we've been working on over the summer. A lot of the focus and emphasis has been on making tools to help the Pressbooks experience work better for you to understand what's happening on your networks. The big exciting feature probably for many of you are the new Network Manager analytics and the book and user lists. But we have maybe 3 or 4 other kind of major features that we're going to show you here to start with. And the first of those that we wanted to jump in is talking about something called common cartridge exports with simple web links. So I'm going to jump into the screen share mode and I'll show you a little bit about what this feature is and what it does. So in just a second, I should be sharing my screen. All of you should be seeing a Pressbooks Network Manager kind of screen. If you're a network manager on a network, you'll be able to see a network admin link in the top left. From the dashboard, if you come to Settings, Sharing and Privacy, actually, you don't see this setting anymore. It's automatically turned on for you. So what happened is we have enabled an export format called we've enabled an export format called Common Cartridge with web links. And so what would happen is if you come to a sample book, you'll see, in addition to the usual export formats you're used to seeing, you'll also see a new option. It'll be called Common Cartridge 1.1 with web links. What this allows you to do is take any book that you want and produce a single export for that book. And in this particular scenario, I'm going to make a Common Cartridge export. Let me refresh this screen here. Okay, there we go. Let me make it as a Common Cartridge with web links. So what I'm doing here is I've just made a single export for this book that's basically a zip file. And in that zip file, it has references or links to every chapter in my book. This is most commonly useful if you want to quickly bring links to your book into a learning management system or some other kind of tool for sharing it. These links won't load securely in the way that they would if you had been using LTI, but it is a quick and dirty way to get just links to parts of your book or all of your book quickly into an LMS using a structured format. So if I wanted to make this available, I could either download it directly from this page, or if I wanted to, at the book level, I could have sharing and privacy enabled so that anybody who visited this book could see, oh look, there's a Common Cartridge with web links file available. Let's download that file. So here's my Introduction to Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. If I wanted to use this in an LMS course, I have a sample Canvas course. This is a free open to share course. I haven't done anything special to this course, but I will come to Settings and I will say Import Course Content. The settings will vary depending on the LMS you use, but the basic principle is similar. I'm going to then select the kind of content I want to import, and in this case I'm going to say Common Cartridge 1.x package. I'll take the file that I just downloaded from my Pressbook, and then I'll decide if I want to bring in all the content or just some part of the book. What it's going to be doing is, instead of actually importing the book, it's going to be importing a series of links to content or chapters in that book. So let's say select specific content and say import. Canvas in this case will run an import routine, and it will let me select which content I want to bring in. And so I'd say, for this particular book, I want to bring in Unit 1, Unit 3, and Unit 4. And I'll say select content. So Canvas will run a little import routine. It says completed. If I look in modules now, you'll see here is Unit 1 of my Pressbook book, and here are discrete links to every chapter in that book. Here's Unit 3, here's Unit 4. When I load this link, it's going to load just like any other external link would load in the LMS. It will load in Canvas in a kind of clunky looking iframe where I can see the content of my book. I can click next to go to the next chapter of the book. And if I wanted to, I could also, Canvas just says, this is the link we can't load securely, so you can click on this and it will just take you directly to the live version of the book. So that's a new feature that we've released and shipped, and anybody who wants to can now produce common cartridge with web link exports for your books, and that's how you'd bring them into the LMS. That's the first feature thing that we released over the summer that we wanted to show everybody. And I'll turn it over to Taylor, who's going to talk about iframe.
I went ahead and linked the documentation for what he just showed you in the chat. So if you wanted to hold on to the instructions for how any book administrator on the network can set that up in their Canvas, that is there. And now I will share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing my network admin dashboard. I'm actually going to the page that Steel was on earlier, where on Network Admin Dashboard, we go to Settings and then Sharing and Privacy. And you'll notice that this page has one setting, and it's the iframe whitelist. So on Pressbooks, we limit the iframes that normal users can put on a page, because iframes can be used hostilely. If somebody wanted to, they could upload malicious content and endanger visitors to sites. So that means that not every piece of content that you find on the web can be embedded in a book. But we have some iframes that have been globally whitelisted across all networks, and we've recently enabled this new feature for every network, where you, the network admins, can add domains to the iframe whitelist, so that under your own discretion of what is secure for visitors to the network, what can normal users put in a book. So say that somebody wanted to embed something from NPR. NPR is not, it doesn't use OEmbed, so you can't put it in the visual editor, and it doesn't, it's not in our global whitelist. But if somebody wanted to embed the audio, I'll just copy the iframe here. Can you see my Firefox window?
Not right now, no.
Not right now, okay. There we go.
I think we're still seeing your NPR.
Are you now seeing a normal chapter?
No.
No, okay. Sorry, guys.
Yes, nice.
Great. Okay, so as a normal user, if I try to embed this iframe, then it will just automatically turn into an embed links, and it won't work. So what you'll get in the visual editor, or in the chapter, sorry, is just this link. But now, if I go into the iframe whitelist as an admin, and I whitelist npr.org, I can go back, and a normal user now take that iframe and embed the NPR content. So you have a choice over what is able to be put on your network over the security of that content, and now not only network admins can choose which you can always use an iframe as a network admin, but you can now enable all sorts of things for your own users to use. I'll pass it back to Steel now and stop sharing.
Thanks, Taylor. The only thing that I would add to that is that we just wanted to emphasize that when you list a URL or even a path there as a network manager, you're essentially saying that you trust that content provider and content from that content provider. So please use it responsibly. Please be sure that you think that that's a reputable content provider, because then your users will be able to embed content from either that full domain or that path on your Pressbooks network. So the next thing that we wanted to show you, we spent a lot of time working on this, and this has been a really hotly demanded feature for some time, and it has to do with how mathematics or math expressions are represented on the web. And so the thing that we did, or that we added over this summer, was support for the Mathjax rendering engine. And we're really excited about this because it makes a lot of different things possible, and it makes more accessible math happen as the native Pressbooks way for the hosted EDU networks. So the first place that you would look would be in any of your books. By default, if you don't have any plugins enabled, you will see at the book level a settings called Mathjax under your book dashboard Mathjax settings. And at the top, you should see a large integral, and that will tell you, hey, Mathjax is working on my network. And you also see the 3 different kinds of input syntaxes that you can now use by default. If you'd like to write something using the LaTeX syntax, you can either use it with the shortcode LaTeX starting and ending, or you can use the $ LaTeX to start and the $ to end, or you can also use the shortcode equation. We didn't list it there, but that's another supported shortcode. If you'd like to use something called ASCII-math as your input syntax, you can use the ASCII-math shortcode or the $ syntax that follows this pattern here. And we also now have added support for MathML as an input type, which is new. So you would enter the MathML tags as desired, starting with the math tag to start and the math tag to end, and whatever it is, the math expression inside. By default, you enter well-formatted math with any of these 3 input syntaxes, and we'll display it in the webbook, and we'll handle it for all of your exports. You also have the ability here to choose the text color for the math expressions here. So this would be a 6-digit hexadecimal number for the color of those math. By default, it's black or 000, but you can change it to whatever you like for that book. And you can also choose the typeface or the font that we render for the SVGs or PNGs in the export files. So there's a handful of different fonts that you can render the math in by default here. In terms of what this looks like in an actual book, so I'm going to say here's a sample chapter. And the first thing I'm going to do is use the LaTeX shortcode to write some LaTeX. So here's the first equation. This means new line, and this is my second equation. And then I'm also going to write another piece of more complicated math using the equation shortcode. So I've just written some math in the book, and then I click Save. When I view the chapter in the webbook, you'll see the Mathjax rendering engine has just rendered this as math. And the difference now from before is this is no longer an image. This is actually Mathjax is rendering it in the browser using the common HTML and CSS model. And there's a bunch of cool features available. So this is an equation with a new line, and here's a second equation. And if you right-click this with your mouse, you'll see all of the different Mathjax capabilities. So for example, one of the things that you can do is you can say, I want you to show me this math as actual MathML. And so I don't know if you're seeing this pop up. Did you see it pop up? Okay, great. So this is showing me that same equation that I just rendered in MathML. So I could take that MathML and paste it into Pressbooks using the MathML, or if I wanted to learn MathML, or if I wanted to see this expressed in MathML, Mathjax did that for me. Another thing that I could do is I want to see this as tech, or LaTeX. So this is showing me how that expression was rendered in LaTeX, which was my source there. So it's kind of performing a translation between the 2 different input formats, which can be helpful depending on what you're used to writing or using. You also have the ability to add the original form as annotation to show some text hints in MathML, or to set up some accessibility settings. So for example, one of the things that I might say is, I want this equation to get 400% bigger, and I want that equation, the zoom factor, to happen whenever someone double clicks the equation. So now I'm going to double click the equation, and you'll see that it's popped up at 400 size. Double click the equation, and I could change that. The user can set those accessibility settings as they want. And you can also choose a different renderer for how you render the math in your browser if you're having trouble. So these are a lot of the cool features that kind of Mathjax builds in. The other things you'll see are a number of accessibility features, whether you want assistive MathML, including the tab order to make it collapsible math, to do an auto collapse, or even to turn on this Explorer feature. I'm not going to go like really deep in depth for all the Mathjax features, but people who are used to using and seeing math expressed with Mathjax will be excited to see the full feature set for Mathjax now happening in the webbook. Another thing that will happen would be when we produce an export for the book, we're going to turn this math equation into SVG images with alt tags or PNG images with alt tags, depending on the export format. So that already happened before, but we're just keeping the same functionality here. If you don't want to use Mathjax or you have some advanced needs, there is also the option, as before, to turn on a plugin. And the plugin that we support here is called WP QuickLaTech. WP QuickLaTech has some advantages and it has some drawbacks, and you can decide what you want to use it for. But if I were to activate this plugin, you'll notice now when I go to settings, the Mathjax setting is no longer there. It's been replaced by QuickLaTech in the book. And when I come to QuickLaTech, you'll see all of the different rules for how you can express LaTeX using this plugin. If I look at basic settings, you'll see the font size, color, similar kinds of settings. But the major difference is QuickLaTech will always render the math, even in the webbook, as an image. And I can choose whether I want to make that image a PNG or an SVG by default, or just let it auto-detect. So in this case, I'm going to say SVG because they scale a little bit better. And if I wanted to, here's where I could declare I always want to use LaTeX throughout the book, or if I needed to declare special packages for doing kind of fancy things with math. Usually people will use the QuickLaTech plugin if they wanted to use some of these packages or they're planning to do something that's not part of the standard LaTeX set. Otherwise, the Mathjax things should be sufficient. So I've switched over to QuickLaTech, and now I want to show you that same chapter, and you'll see kind of a difference here. When I render this chapter now, oh well, something broke. Let me go back into my. So let's say LaTeX is the shortcode I want to use, and LaTeX. Make sure I don't have any weird stuff in there. Okay, let's save that, and let's view the chapter. So here, these have been rendered as images with QuickLaTech. If I were to inspect them in the browser, you'll see that they do have, down here, they do have an alt tag that does show the equation, but it's not quite as flexible or as powerful in certain ways in rendering as the native Mathjax solution is. So that's just a quick demonstration of what we've added for math and how it changes things in the book. I don't think I need to go into too exhaustive detail there, but I will go ahead and turn the, oh actually, that's basically Mathjax. I think this is probably a good place to pause and say, did we have any questions, Liz, in the chat that we should answer related to the first three things that we demoed there?
Most were related to the iframes. Taylor's put the documentation in the chat. People were asking about some examples of how people might use that in a university context.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think I see Lauren's question. Lauren, I was asking, do you have other examples of sites or content providers that people have allowed to be added to their iframe whitelist? I don't know if we could share that offhand, but that might be something you'd ask Lauren in the Pressbooks community, the network, the community of practice. I know of different institutions or universities that say, oh, we've made some kind of interactive content for chemistry and we hosted it on this server. We'd like to be able to we know that this server is run by our chemistry department. We'd like to be able to embed those in our books. And rather than us adding that to the global whitelist, we let the network manager decide whether they trust that source or not.
As far as I know, I know of people who have contacted us in the past asking if we can globally whitelist things. And so some of the sources that they were looking for were like Google Slides. You can whitelist that now, NPR, MuseScore, some different academic websites that create visual media like math assignment type quiz questions and stuff like that. So it's just been a broad variety of different sources.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Thanks, Taylor. Okay, so what I want to do now is we're going to get into the exciting part, the reason why you probably all came to the webinar. And I'm going to go back and share my screen again. And in this part of the demo, what we're going to show you are what we've just shipped and what we're calling the Network Manager Analytics piece. So for now, you'll be able to find everything that we're demoing from your network dashboard. Right now, it's all housed under this stats link. And you'll see there's a stats, a book list, and a user list. We're going to explain those in turn, and Taylor's going to start by showing us the stats. Let me jump out of the screen share. And Taylor, you're muted right now, sorry.
Sorry. Starting out from your network admin dashboard, you'll see that there's a new icon that's on the left menu, stats. So from stats, you'll find the stats, the book, and the user list. But if you click it right out without navigating to the second panel, you'll land on your stats menu. So we currently offer 4 new visualizations, these graphs that we've built that show the data that was already on your network. These were coming straight from the user accounts and the books and the metadata that have already existed. This is not new information, but we're displaying it in new ways for you that can help you see more the significant changes that have happened over time and help you administer your network. The first one you'll see is the users over time graph. So it shows 3 different pieces of data: the total users, the subscribers, and the contributors. So there's a slight variation there. So instead of just showing the users, we're showing people who would be reading the book and people who are creating the books. So, I mean, this is our test network, so we don't have very many subscribers.
Just to add, the subscribers will be most likely to be created if you're using the LTI provider tool. So those of you who have the gold networks that are using LTI provider, that's where you'll see the subscribers mostly come from. Otherwise, you probably won't see any subscribers unless you've created them explicitly. Sorry.
Right, so anybody can add a subscriber to a book, but more likely if you have an LTI connection, you'll be able to see really easily the number of students that are accessing those open books that you have connected to courses through an LMS like Canvas. So you'll see each of those as a different line on this graph. You can choose which view you want to see. You can take away and select certain lines. You can also decide on what time frame you want to be seeing this. So if, for instance, you wanted to see the total growth in your network's readership or creation of user creation over the last year instead of the whole time of the network, you could select the date here and apply the filter, and it will load to show you.
I think you forgot to select the date, Taylor.
Oh, did I? Thank you. It'll load to show you only the year. And so you can see that in the last 12 months, our test network has gone from 30 to 83 users. I'm sure a lot of yours are a lot more impressive. So the books over time is the next one, and it's similar. So again, you can choose the date frame that you want to see, as well as the different types of books that are in your network. The total books, the books that have been cloned, the public books, and the private books. So it shows you the overall growth, but also helps you identify, for instance, what is the proportion of books that are on your network that have been adapted versus the total number? Or how many books do you have that are in progress right now as private books that haven't been published yet? Or how many books on your network are already published projects that are available for people to read right now? And you can reset everything with the dates and the lines and configure it however you want to. This updates as your book list updates, and as you make changes, it should update about once a night. The next one is the network storage graph. This is the books on your network that are at least 1% of the storage capacity of your network. So what you're looking at isn't 100% of the storage you have. This is not saying that all of your storage is already taken, but this is a comparison of the proportion that a book is taking to other books on the network. For instance, physical geology here is 12% of the storage that's currently being used, and it's about 375 MB. So comparing that to maybe a book over here that only takes 18.74 MB, you might wonder, why is that book so much bigger than other books? If you click on a book here, you'll be taken to its media library. So you can tell what is making the book as big as it is. And it's usually not the written content. Text doesn't take up very much storage. It's going to be the media. And so this can be helpful just getting to know the trends of how much a book typically takes up on your network. And if you notice that one is particularly large, maybe that user needs help figuring out how to edit images to put in their book, and different things like that can help you administer books as they're being created. The fourth graph over here is user revisions over last, and this is mostly helpful for you to know who's working on projects at what time, who may be needing help with their OER projects, and where resources are going, that kind of stuff. So you can see the changes, the revisions that have been made over the last year, 3 months, month, and week. And then if you click on the bar of a user, you'll be taken to their user info page, which Steel can cover. He'll be up in just a sec with his screen share.
Sorry, I was still muted. I did the same thing, right? So I'm back in screen share here, and just as Taylor said, from this user revision page, you can see, over the month or the week. And in this particular case, I want to learn more about this user named Steel. I can see that Steel has made, several hundred revisions over the last 3 months, and I'd like to know a bit more about what kind of revisions and where Steel's been active. So by clicking on this, it'll take us to a new page that's called User Info. The top of the user info, it's just going to display basic information about a user, the username, their name, when their account was created, when they last logged in, how many books they belong to, and the total revision count this person has made. Then down below, it'll show me which books specifically they belong to by role and a little bit more information. So I can look at this and say, oh wow, Steele's an admin on 18 books on this network. And he's made a small number of revisions on all of these. And then this one right here, this book, is the book where he's made a ton of revisions. That's the book that Steele's really active in. And some of the other ones he just doesn't seem quite as active in. And he was really last active there in April of 2019. So yeah, that's something he worked on a lot, but he hasn't really touched it since April. So that's a good proxy for how Steele's been using our network. And then I can also see, oh, Steel also happens to be an editor in this other book. He's only made one revision, so he probably just brought on board to look at that book. He hasn't done too much there. So instead of just thinking, oh, Steele's got 19 books and that's a lot, I can say, oh, well, Steele's kind of active on a few books, but really active here. That's his major project. So just from that one kind of new user page, you get a little bit more proxy information about a user and can help you understand where you might be wanting to reach out to users or what they've been up to on the network lately. Jumping from the actual user info page, you can go back to what we call the user list. So you can access that here or from a user page. And the user list, you'll notice, is in many ways pretty similar to what we currently have for this user list, except we think better. And this is why it's better. So on the user list now, you'll see the information is presented in a much tighter, kind of more organized fashion. All of these columns are sortable and expandable, so I can change the size and I can change the order. This will be a display change that only happens for me as a user, and it will be usually remembered for a short amount of time. So if I log out and log back in, it will probably remember the latest changes I made, but at a certain point, the memory will fade on that, and you might have to reset your settings. But here I can say, okay, here are the users on this network. Here are their names when entered. Here are their email addresses. Here's when they were registered. Here's when they last logged in. And here, this tells me in one glance how many books they belong to. So I can look and say, oh, wow, Liz, Steele, and Taylor, they're the 3 really active users on this network, or the widespread users. And at more of a glance, I can also see what type of role these people have in each of those books. So Liz is in 27 books, 26 of them she's an admin, and 1 of them she's an editor. In addition to being able to view this information, I could also jump to the book info page for any given user by clicking on their name, which is what Taylor was just showing you last time. And you have filters now. So first of all, I can search up here and show me all the users who have the name Steele. That's helpful. There's 3 of them. And if I wanted to increase the page size, I could do that down there. Or I could say reset those filters and show me everyone. The user properties thing is very helpful too, because what I want to look at now is I want a list of everybody on my network who is an editor or above. And I've just filtered that list. So now I have 21 results. Out of the 83 users on my network, there are only 21 people who have an editor or above role. Let's say I'd like to contact all those people. I can now download a CSV that has all of this information that I saw, including the email addresses. So I just made for myself a user list of the 21 people who are editors or above on my network, and I'm going to email them and say, hey, we're offering a editor and admin training for Pressbooks. If you're interested, here's the date and time, right? I could also say, I want to know anybody who was added since, I don't know, who was added to my network since June, because that's when I did a last training, and who has last logged in after, I don't know, somebody who's been active in August. So new users who've been active in the last 2 months. And here's that list of users. And I want to only get people who are admins in at least 1 book. So now I've got, these are the 3 users who meet that criteria. You can combine these filters in whatever way is helpful to you, but hopefully what we're providing for you now are more tools to get at the information that you'd like to get at and see it in a more concise and usable way. We're pretty excited about that. You'll see also at the top, this will tell you when this data was last synchronized. Generally, it will happen fairly regularly, at least once a day, and it will also give you just a kind of straight up statement about how many total users you have there. And that, in a nutshell, is the user list. I'm going to jump out of the screen share, and I'll let Taylor show you the book list next.
I did want to add that the CSV button that he showed you, there's an important nuance to remember. The CSV works similar to the Apply Filters button in that you can choose filters and download a CSV with those filters, and it will apply all the filters that you've chosen, but it won't apply to the table. So those are 2 different mechanisms, the Apply Filters and the Download CSV button. So if you notice that your CSV is looking different from the table, that would be why. Okay, I will jump into sharing. So we're back at the network admin dashboard. We've gone to stats and then book list. So this is what the new book list looks like, similar to the user page, of course. And like the differences between the old user page and the new user page, you'll see a lot of similarities, but you're also going to see a lot of new information. So instead of just showing the book's URL and the creation date and the maybe 2 or 3 other pieces of information, you've got the cover image there that you can connect to the book, as well as the last edit date, the amount of words that's in the book, the number of authors, the number of readers who would be the subscribers, storage size, language, subject, theme, license, in public or privacy status, and then the in catalog status. So all of this is coming from the metadata of a book, and we've taken that into a table and presented it here. So you still have the basic functions of the last books page. So from here you can go to a book's homepage. You can go to its edit page, the dashboard, and then you've got the options to deactivate, activate, and delete. You'll see that the books in red here are things that we didn't need anymore, so we deactivated them, but didn't take them off the network. The delete button is permanent, so that's helpful to remember. The deactivate and delete actions are immediate, so you'll see the changes right off. But if you make changes to books across the network, generally other things will take overnight to update. It just updates once a day. So in addition to all the new information, there's different tools that you can use to sort and filter through these books. One, you can use the different columns here to sort up and down. So say you wanted to sort by license. You can sort up or down, and it will sort alphabetically. So all the all rights reserves books are now in my list now, but if we reverse it, it'll start with CC by. And it same works for everything. You can, you can sort by date, by the number of words. In addition, you have the ability to change on the right two columns, the in public and in catalog status. So you'll notice that the ones that are private are marked with an X and public is a check mark, and the same for catalog. Things that are in the catalog are an X, and things that aren't in the catalog are a check mark. So if I click a book, an X in the in catalog column, I can change that to be in the catalog. You'll notice that it also changed the public status. Books that are private cannot be made or cannot be put into the catalog. So if you put a private book in the catalog, it'll automatically make it public. The reverse is also true. Books that are in the catalog and public cannot be made private. So if you mark that book private, it'll take it out of the catalog at the same time. In any other case, you're just changing it from public to private and so on. In addition to these, the one-off settings, you can also do this in bulk. So if I wanted to select all the books on the list, you go to the bulk actions menu down here and make all of these books public. I could do that and then hit apply, and all of those books would then be made public. There's also the same, a lot of the same features that you saw in the users list. There's a statement here that has the total number of books on the network as well as your total storage, a search function, the total results that you'll have at any of any search or any filter, and the ability to download any list as a CSV. In addition to that, there's also a lot of filters that you can use to find books on your network. For instance, if you wanted to find only public original books that were CC by licensed, you'd filter to see only those books on the network. Notice that the book status, public, private, these are binary options. So if you choose one, it'll unselect the other one. And the same is true for original and cloned. You'll also notice that at the top, it will say the number of filters that you have active. Filters are cumulative across these tabs that you see. So that just lets you know where you have different filters active. So here we have the book status, license, and plugins and features that lets you choose whether to see books that only have H5P activities, for instance, or books that are using QuickLaTech. In language and subject, you can sort by the metadata language of a book. So we have a couple different options for language, but this is specifically looking for what somebody has put as the book language in the book information page. And the only languages that will appear on this are the ones that have been used on your network. But we don't have French here, but French could be on this list if it was used on your network. Same for a book subject. Only the book subjects that are used on your network will appear here. If I wanted to reset my filters and then search for education, it'll show me all the education books that I have here, which can be helpful if you're trying to find books on your network that are a good fit for a class at your institution. Size and storage, you can filter by how big a book is. So in terms of storage or in terms of word count. So that can help you if you're looking for projects that are closer to completion, projects that are pretty well developed, or the reverse. You can determine which books still need some work to get to a publishable amount of content. And then themes and exports. So you can search by theme, as well as availability, and export by format. So if you only wanted to look for books on the network that have produced exports and allow downloads from the homepage and are available as a digital PDF and apply filters, that would, you know which books that you can send people to, that they can download a digital PDF file, which they can then also be printed off, etc. Am I missing anything? Do you think, Steel?
No, I mean, I think what you were showing is pretty exhaustive, and hopefully, I think that the goal mainly for you as network managers is to be able to develop the kind of queries that will help you in whatever your publishing goals or objectives are. Ultimately, I think talking about what's next here, this is for us the beginning steps or the framework under which we can make this kind of information available across many networks. And so what we're envisioning building over the next several months would be a public, filterable, searchable list of public books from any or all Pressbooks network that you could do the same kind of querying and searching for. So let's say you wanted to find a book that had more than 5,000 words and a CC BY license on the topic of education. We'll be able to help you look across 40 or 50 Pressbooks networks that were contributing their data into that, and it'd be a kind of discovery tool. So we're pretty excited about that, and we think that there's a really bright future for what we're going to make possible, and hopefully drive the adoption and adaptation of other books from other networks on your networks. A few other things that I wanted to highlight that I think we're working on that I can tell you about. One of them is those of you who are participating in the Pressbooks Community Forum. We have a private group for educational client managers, and about a month ago we posted showing a preview of some of this work, kind of driving up excitement. And we also said, hey, we're going to be redoing some of the network settings, and we asked for a vote. And people voted on Taylor's idea versus my idea, and everyone picked Taylor's idea, of course. And so we said, okay, we'll build Taylor's idea. And so we're working on the finishing touches for that, but the preview of that would be, this is a demo network, but what we're going to be building is a new single network settings page for you as network managers. And you'll see something like this. It will tell you who your current network managers are, who you can contact to change that, and it will give you a bunch of default values for your network that you can change quickly. It will also show you some values for book and user registration so that you can control that yourself. Right now you email us to change those settings, but we want to make that self-service. It'll also give you the ability to send one or multiple admins notifications when new books and users are created if you desire that. And then it'll be the place where you can put your Google Analytics, all the kinds of things you can do now from the dashboard, but it'll be a bit cleaner and in one place. So we're working on the finishing touches for that and hope to have a version 1 ready to release for you very soon. I think that'll be exciting. It sounds like in the chat some of you think so too. And then the next kind of steps for us would be to build a public directory of books across many networks that you could find and visit, and ultimately hopefully some better cloning tools that would let you clone from many networks more quickly. We also are going to work, I think, on building a couple of more visualizations here on the stats page. We started with the 4 that we thought would be most useful to you, but we know there's other kinds of things that you might want to visualize. And so we'll be working on those over the next couple of months. This feels for me like a good place to stop for questions or feedback. So if there's anybody that posed a question, Liz, in the chat that we should look at or get to, I'm happy to look at those now.
I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat, but perhaps people may want to vocalize their questions now.
Sure. Okay, so I see a question from Karen, which is, are you working on the number of views of a particular book? So the answer to that's a little complicated, Karen. The answer is that no, we're not working on it on our end, but if people do want that information, the way that they could get it would be through Google Analytics, that Google Analytics integration that I was just showing you there. So we're we're not currently planning on tracking visitor information. That's not within really our privacy policy or what we're interested in. But if a network manager wants it, we'll let you do self-service Google Analytics, and you can view both page views as well as book download info. I know eCampus Ontario is quite interested in that, and I think has been doing some work there, and I think the University of Minnesota has been looking at book download stats. So that's Shar's question as well in the chat. Yes, right now, if you use the Google Analytics integration, the information about book title, file format, and number of downloads will be sent to your Google dashboard. And so you can see for each book that you make public downloads available, how many times it's been downloaded in what format over a given period of time. You can't get those from our visualizations, but you can get them from the Google Analytics. We do have a small chapter about the Google Analytics integration. Again, that's a third-party tool that we don't explicitly support ourselves, but there are, I think, a lot of people that have used it to good effect. And if you had more questions about it, that'd probably be a good thing to ask in that community of practice place that I was looking at earlier.
It's not possible to download the stats from our visualizations page, but the stats that are used to make those visualizations are in the user and book lists, if that helps.
Yes, thanks, Taylor. Okay, so Christina said, what will the better cloning tool look like? Oh man, putting this on the spot. Well, so it's unbuilt yet, so it's vaporware. So let me say that first. But I think what we're imagining is right now, we have a cloner tool that's essentially one-to-one. You find a known book that's public with a known URL and you clone that book. Ideally, what we'd like to be able to allow people to do is something that's more like a bulk clone operation, where if you were looking at a large public list of Pressbooks and you filtered it and it said like, oh, 11 results, you could tell that thing, okay, I'd like to clone these 11 books to my network. Please and thank you. And then it would go get them and tell you when it was done. The details we haven't worked out and built yet, but that's the kind of general idea. And Lillian's killing the chat, offering her help. Lillian, you can host the next webinar, it looks like, so get ready. Okay, other questions? There's a lot happening, so I'm not sure if I'm catching up.
I think you've gotten everything.
I would say, and then just to highlight again, the place where these kind of conversations can and maybe should happen, if you want, is that community of practice, the Pressbooks community. So if you haven't yet, let me just emphasize that again. If you haven't yet done this, we'd like to welcome you to do this. If you visit pressbooks.community, you'll see, and I'll just log out so I can show you the kind of workflow. If I've logged out, this is our public forum for open source users. If you sign up and create an account, you can do it with your email or you can do it with Google, GitHub, or Twitter accounts. I've hooked mine into each of my accounts, so I'm authenticated. And then let me know. If you're a network manager at an EDU institution, let us know, and we'll add you to this private group for people like you. And so this is a place where people can discuss issues of shared interest or shared importance. We posted a note about the network analytics webinar here. We sometimes post about development work in progress and ask people to vote on features. People have been discussing, for example, there was a great question, I think it started with Ariana, about policies and service models, and I had a really good discussion from Lauren and from other people that were saying, oh, here's how we support Pressbooks and here's what we do. For example, a topic might be, how are you using Google Analytics to track user visits and downloads? And Lillian might lead off with the post, and then you could, Jim or other people could ask questions and discuss more about that. It looks like there's one new and updated topic. There's Karen already. So Karen is demoing in real time exactly what we're saying. So Lillian, please tell us how you use Google Analytics. Lillian, you're on the spot. So that's exactly how the forum, I think, would work in practice. You don't have to join it, of course, but we think that this would be a value-added resource. And look, Lillian's replying, so I'll stop sharing because I don't want to embarrass anybody else further.
But of course, it's helpful to talk to each other and to build a community of open resources, but it's also helpful for us to know what you guys are talking about and what you're looking for from Pressbooks, so that we can take that into consideration as we're building the product and making it better.
Lauren Ray asked, sorry if I missed this, is there a way to filter books in the book list by those that have hypothesis enabled? And the answer to that right now is no, actually. The reason is Hypothesis as a plugin is network enabled by default, and then it can be turned on in various ways at the book level. So there's no good, clear way for us to say which book is actively using it or not, because it's sort of on, but not really, it's like active, but not enabled by default. So the easiest way that you probably do that is at the Hypothesis website, you can look by domain. You can do a domain search to see whether there are annotations at a given domain. So that would be something you'd do from the Hypothesis client end. We could probably write a little follow-up kind of in nerdy detail about that, but there's not a really great, easy way for us to make that available right now, Lauren, sorry. One thing I will note though, when Taylor was saying you can filter by whether a book is using TablePress or H5P or the glossary tool, not only can you tell whether they're using that, but there's a number filter. So you can say, I want to see books that have more than one H5P activity, or books that have more than 10, or so you can not only filter by whether they're using it, but by how much they're using it. We'll take another second or two or another minute or two and see if anybody else has kind of questions that they wanted to drop in the chat. And then we have just a kind of general question for everyone before we wrap up. Okay, so the thing that we wanted to close with is, this is something we often do in our open source calls, but this is a community of really interesting people doing all kinds of exciting things. And so I wanted to say, is there anybody in the audience for this webinar that is working on a project or has recently completed a project that they think is of enough interest that they'd want to share it with the rest of the people on the call? Something you're working on or that you think would be of interest for our group? And somebody says, oh, okay, Lee says, oh, pick me. Lee, we picked you. If you want to unmute yourself, you can tell. This is Lee Kinch-Pedrosa from Rebus.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to take a minute to mention our textbook success program that we just launched, and the first cohort will be beginning in October. The program is a Rebus community initiative, and it's targeted towards program managers and faculty, librarians, other people who are involved at the institutional level, and people with institutional funding. So basically what we're doing is we're combining a 12-week course on open textbook creation with regular check-ins to help creators and administrators build the infrastructure of a thriving OER program, or OER creation program. So we're going to group together creators because we love community and we love these kinds of talks. We're going to group together creators into a cohort with others from within their institutions, but also from other schools and other institutions around them, hopefully to create some sort of cross-institutional collaboration and to strengthen the open education community as a whole. The course itself is primarily focused on OER creation, so particularly of interest to people who use Pressbooks, I think. So yes, particularly focused on OER creation, but we do throw in a little marketing, a little project management, to sort of give participants a really well-rounded knowledge of everything that goes into making a great open textbook. So yeah, I'm really excited about this project, and I'm happy to talk about it as much as people want to talk about it. And yeah, so if you want to know more about it, I can drop this link
in the chat if you'd be willing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. That does sound of interest.
Yeah.
So there's a link in the chat that's more about this, the textbook success program. Is there anybody else in the call or the community that has something that they've been working on or that they think they want to share with the group?
Can I just make a request? I've seen some really cool open textbooks come across the transom on Twitter lately. And if you have something that is launching and you're just making it, you know, it's public, it's live, you want to put some promotion around it, please let us know because we'll definitely help to amplify those books. So let me know or tweet it and we'll be sure to retweet and give it some attention as well.
Thanks, Liz. I'll give everybody maybe another 30 seconds or a minute if they think of something and they want to share. Oh, Lillian has something. Go ahead, Lillian.
Hey, so I just wanted to share that we're working on versioning a little bit in the eCampus Ontario Open Library. which is like largely Pressbooks books. So we redesigned what our item views looks like in our catalog so that we can integrate our Pressbooks catalog with our other catalog. But I don't know what OER are adapted from which other OER. So I'm just sort of like backtracking that. So I would really encourage you guys to check out our open library. And also if you know like OER that have relationships with each other, if you could let me know so that we can improve that items view and start to sort of show people that like adaptation train and remix train that is actually happening.
Thank you. That sounds great. I actually wanted to call somebody out if they don't mind. If Abby Elder is present and listening in the call, Abby, would you be able to tell people a little bit more about something that you recently released that might be of interest for the group?
Which thing are you talking about in this case?
Your pick, but I was thinking about the most recent, the kit. I think it's. I don't remember what your name is.
The OER starter kit. So I recently put out, I guess you could call it a remix project in terms of taking about 5 or 6 different OER handbooks that are available on the market and then just general information I've been putting out on websites and so on lately into a starter kit for faculty. If you haven't seen it yet, you probably haven't been on Twitter lately because I've been all over sharing it. But basically, it's a short handbook for any faculty member that wants to get started understanding what OER are, finding them or creating them for their own courses. So I'll share a link to that in the chat as well.
I think somebody already did, Liz already did, so they beat you to it, but thank you, Abby. The other thing that I wanted to know, we posted this in the Pressbooks Community of Practice, but I'll just drop it in the chat as well. The COCO Foundation, the Collaborative Knowledge they used to be known at, is hosting a new awards series for Open Publishing Awards. And they have 2 categories, one for open source software, but another for open content. They have looks like a really great group of judges, and the deadline, you can nominate yourself or other projects that you're aware of. The deadline for nominations is coming up soon. I think it's in a few days. But if you have a book that you know of at your university or a project or some content that you think is worthy of recognition, we would strongly encourage you to nominate it and get the recognition that the people who worked hard on it deserve. I don't know too much more about the awards other than what I just said, but it's probably of interest to people in the group. Yeah,
it looks like Karen had something to share as well.
Great, Karen.
Thank you, Taylor. I'll just make it quick because we only have a minute left. At the Open Textbook Network, we just launched Pub 101. So I see Open Textbook Network members here, and if you're not, I'm happy to talk about how you can join us. But Pub 101 is an informal orientation to open textbook publishing. We're going to get together once a week for 6 weeks and go through the publishing curriculum together. And Pub 101 is the new pathway into the publishing cooperative, which is a whole set of community support and services and resources. I'll put like a little table overview of those in the chat for you. But if you'd like to learn about Pub 101, you're welcome to extend it also to people at your institutions. So for example, consortial members can extend it to all of their institutions and invite people from groups there. So it's a very open experience for any Open Textbook Network member. All right, we're at the hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking of librarians, the last thing I'll mention is, I don't think Heather White or Holly Wheeler are in the chat today, but they're 2 of our colleagues at Mount Hood Community College. They've just released a really interesting guide for MARC records and a OER MARC template. This is a big discoverability issue, and right now there's not a good, easy way across most platforms to automatically generate MARC records, as Karen probably knows to her better than any of us. But it's a really nice guide and a resource. I will try to link to the template and maybe the message or the email in the chat here from Heather as well. And I think that's something we've had a longstanding interest in Pressbooks as well, so maybe that's something we all work on together. Okay, Abby says she's working on it. I knew that there'd be librarians in this group that are more on it than I am. So I wanted to just say on behalf of everybody at Pressbooks, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all the work that you're doing at wherever you're at to further and support open education, to make high quality learning material for students and others available. And please do stay in contact with us and let us know what we can do to help you succeed in your goals and your missions, and the ideas that you have for how to make Pressbooks better for you or for your users.